You're listening to the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt, where we talk about hunting, shooting, fishing, camping, and everything else that the great outdoors has to offer. Let's get into it. All right, guys, before we get into the episode tonight, I just wanted to say a couple of things. The response from last episode with Paul from Secrets of the Red has been fantastic. So if you haven't already, give it a listen, or better yet, share it on your socials, or tell someone who might not have heard it, because it was an absolute cracker with so much fantastic information if you want to chase red deer. I also wanted to thank each and every one of you who've listened to the podcast. We've just hit over 65,000 listens in just over 7 months. That's absolutely unreal. I never thought that this would be anywhere near that, and I appreciate all you out there that tune in and listen and support me. It does take a lot of my time up, and support is one of the main reasons I keep on doing it. I don't have any sponsors, don't get any money from this, so it's definitely just a labour of love. I do love what the Hunters Campfire guys are doing up there with their hunting camp, because it's such a cool thing being able to bring a variety of people together and promote hunting in such a positive light with nothing to gain. Well done, boys. Keep it up. Lastly, before we get into it, in this episode, we discuss the sharing of game meat in Victoria. I know a lot of people say that you can, but that's not really the case, and I'm more than happy to share the documentation of the parliamentary discussion that clearly shows that you can't do it. If you want a copy or the link, just shoot me an email or hit me up on the socials, and then you can decide for yourself, because it's all there in black and white. All right, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. I love hunting, and I love how it can be done by absolutely anyone. And tonight's guest really does show that. So we've got Chrissy, who is an older lady, but she's just out there getting it done, and I've got a lot of admiration for that. So let's get into it. All right, guys, welcome back. Tonight, we've got Chrissy, the Aussie Huntress, joining us from Victoria. How are you, Chrissy? Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm very well, thanks, Matt. Thanks for the time to have me on the show.
No, not at all. Look, we've had a bit of a chat off air like I do with most guests, and one of the things that struck me straight away, and I really want to get into it, is obviously being a female hunter or huntress, there's not a great deal of other females out there hunting. It is quite a small percentage in the community, and that's why I wanted to get you on. I really want to try and focus on getting a lot more females onto the show, because I think it's really, really important as a hunting community, shooting community, just to have more females involved. It's such a small percentage when the population in Australia has such a 50-50 split, and it's an opportunity where we can grow our numbers, and I feel that's the best thing for hunting and shooting going forward.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that I aim for, and I try and welcome women into the hunting world. It's largely a man's domain. Traditionally, it's like hunting is a sport for kings, as they used to say. So, if we look at the statistics, though, they're clearly quite minimal. Last time I looked, it was about 1 to 2% of all firearms holders are women, and that can be reduced further into the hunting spectrum with, some of the hunting licenses for other areas of, having a license. So, yeah, it's quite minimal overall.
Yeah, look, it's one of these things, I don't know how to change it. I've had multiple conversations with other people. Kate Fantanell was one of them, who's quite a large advocate over in WA, and she's been working with SSAA, and I think Senator Yelmholm, if I said that right. It's a bit of a tricky tongue twister there. And we had Tegan on earlier, who did her best to get onto the SSAA board and make some change down in Vic as well. How do we really get more females in? It's such a tricky one, because I don't understand why more females don't get involved, because I'll tell you now, every female I've shot with, better shots than I am, and they just seem far more natural at it. I thought there'd be a lot more and it would continue to grow. Now, I think it is growing slightly, but just how do we make it quicker?
I think it's a very individual thing. Like, clearly, a lot of women, I would say, just simply aren't interested or, don't want to get involved in hunting. Whereas I think historically it's been more of a bloke thing or a man's sport, etc. It's like a lot of things that it's slow progress, that women are getting the right support to have a go. I've always been in hunting with my upbringing, etc. So to me, it's quite a natural thing for me to be doing. Whereas I think having a firearm and being licensed overall is, I don't know, in Australia, I feel like it's frowned upon, whereas compared to America, like you look at the firearms proportion of the population and it's astronomical, whereas here, I think back when Howard pretty much, some people say, disarmed the country, I think that has something to do with it. It's sort of got that, it's been tarnished as, I don't know, it's kind of in a way got a bit of a criminal element still attached to it. But even though it definitely hasn't, you talk to people in general and say, oh yeah, I do a bit of hunting, and sometimes, I don't know, more often than not, you kind of hit a brick wall rather than being able to elaborate and talk about it and share stories and hunting adventures. It's kind of like, ooh, shouldn't have said that.
I'm with you. It's like this negative connotation that you've got a firearm. And I say it all the time, and I've been on so many, not arguments on Facebook, but more a mate will post something and I'll sort of go into the actual figures and data and talk to them about it. And the amount of backlash from other people, including friends, that clearly have absolutely no idea about the topic, but it's almost like guns are bad. And that I definitely feel comes from the mainstream media. That negative connotation doesn't help our situation. But it's funny because I was listening to another podcast from the United States, and I was only listening to it 2 days ago. And they were talking about deer, and they were talking about the numbers of deer over in the States and how it's so important that the main way they control numbers over there is through hunting. And they were talking about what are the ways that deer die. And they went through the percentages, such as, whether it be hit by a car, whether it be predation, whether it be all these different things. And the reality is that they were all really small fry, except for hunting. Hunting were taking about 6 million per year off the landscape. And it's really interesting because they say that's why the government allows so much hunting and pushes hunting, and there's such a big thing such as the taxes over there for conservation. And I reflected over here where we want to do the complete opposite. It's all about, we don't want hunters involved. We really want to start pushing things like 1080, aerial culling, all these different elements. And it's realistically the opposite here. It's that, like, the population is against firearms because of what has happened in the past, but nothing really big has happened in the past. And I say that a bit tongue in cheek, but like the reality is Port Arthur was the real big one here that really, as you sort of said, John Howard disarmed the country. That was like a real standalone. There's only been a couple. And when you look at it in such small scheme, it really baffles me a lot of the time that the population's so against it and so misinformed about the role hunters could play in conservation in this country. And the argument has been that deer are a native over there in the States, but then let's flip that and say, well, kangaroos are a native here, but we can't hunt them. We can cull them, but we can't really hunt them like we can deer. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, well, I think, when we look at it like that, our native kangaroos are pretty much in competition with the deer as we speak. And it's one of those things where the deer are going to get the jump all over the roos and our native species because they're able to adapt to our landscape and our vegetation so much more readily than what we have as our natives, yeah.
That's always been a super interesting one to me because deer have adapted so quickly. And I don't think we'll ever wipe them out. So I think that it's interesting when there's some groups out there that want them gone off the landscape completely. I don't think that will ever happen. But they are here and they definitely need to be managed, and we should be looking to best practice, which in my mind is the United States. Even when we look at kangaroos, we don't really control the numbers. I mean, we do culling, and that's for the commercial harvesting industry. And the landholders can get, I mean, I don't know how it is in Victoria, but I know up here in New South Wales, speaking to a couple of landholders, it's a bit of a nightmare to try and get tags for kangaroos. There's not the ability to just manage it as they see fit. And I don't think too many would be just wiping them out. I think that most farmers, especially ones I've spoken to, they just don't want an overabundance of anything. And that's not good for any population.
No, definitely not. And in recent conversations with some of the property holders over near the Grampians, for example, like one property ownership comes to my mind, and, you know, they're actually quite stressed at the moment with the numbers of the kangaroos as to the available vegetation for them to feed on, because as the vegetation becomes limited, the animals are literally going to go into starvation. And, you know, there's thousands of, I say thousands, not just hundreds, of deer within that region. And again, the competition to have a decent feed for, you know, their survival, I think there needs to be more concern now before it becomes a real problem. Like, it's going to become a real problem if there's not more deer reduction. I personally don't like seeing it done from an aerial perspective. If more people are allowed to hunt within, say, that region, for example, you know, a lot of it's national park. So you're not allowed to hunt in national park land, but that's I guess, a double-edged sword right there. While you're not allowed to hunt in that region, what's going to happen? The population's just going to get out of control and back to competing for food.
Yeah, look, I've said it numerous times on a previous podcast. I had Mark Latham, and he was with the One Nation Party at the time, and he put through basically where their stance was on hunting. And it was fantastic, because one of the big ones was he wanted to open up national parks, and he was going to do everything he could, because he said New South Wales alone was like 91% national parks or some ridiculous amount. And he said, we're not allowed to do anything with these things. They're basically locked up, key thrown away. And that becomes a massive problem. As you just said, if there's animals in there on the landscape, you're not able to take them off the landscape and control the numbers. They're going to breed and breed and breed. And I've always said that about this country, is we do have a lack of big predators. And realistically, the main predator should be humans. And we've really restricted the ability of people to go out there and hunt. And it's one thing I do love about the Victorian system, and I talk about it all the time, your ability to go onto public land down there without having to book it, etc. Up here in New South Wales, we've got state forests, we've got a book. It's, you know, you can miss out on places you want to go because of limited spots. And then definitely the national parks, which I know are full of deer, they're locked up.
Yeah. Well, access to the forest areas here in Victoria is kind of open slather. And, you know, that certainly draws all kinds of hunters and shooters, etc., at different times of the year. But, you know, it's certainly, look, there's room for it to be better managed overall. And I think if you know, the politicians and the leaders that we have in place don't start to, you know, see what's really happening out there, like every year the numbers, like it's a mathematic equation that's just going to keep increasing. You can't deny that that's going to happen.
Yeah, and look, that's my concern, is that the easy, cheap method is going to be 1080 poison. And they're going to do what's going on over in New Zealand. They're going to dump it, and it's going to wipe a lot of the deer off the landscape. But more importantly, having that poison out in the landscape, I can't see that being a good thing for anything. And that's one of my big concerns. When you've got the availability of a lot of hunters and then I feel that hunting would also grow if we had that conversation about this and about how most hunters out there are ethical, they're safe, they're trying to do the right thing and harvest the meat. In fault of that, they're not letting another pest species such as foxes or wild dogs use the carcasses that have been shot aerial cold. That's just going to promote those pests to keep on growing. So it is a very concerning situation. But look, enough about that. Let's get into your story. So you've been hunting for a while.
Yeah, I have.
And how that came about with your family?
Yeah, I guess pretty much as kids growing up, we had the slug gun, then advancing to the 22. And then, I think I was about 16. Oh, it might have been, I'll say 16 when I had my first shot out of a 303 rifle out on a friend's farm. Yeah, and it's just sort of proceeded from there. I now have got into the deer hunting, although I'm pretty new at deer hunting, I have to confess. Yeah.
So, look, it sounds similar to me. I've only really jumped into the deer hunting sort of late 2018, and the COVID period really stuffed me. I'm from up in Sydney, so there's not too many areas to hunt up around where I am. So it is a travelling time. So COVID really put a dampener on that. So it's a similar sort of style for me, just getting into the deer. I've had firearms for a damn long time and shot other things, especially small game, for a long time. But deer are a different animal altogether. Geez, they're fun to chase.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely hooked, and my son's, I think he's pretty hooked on it as well. And if you're up for a challenge, it's the species to be hunting, because they're so unpredictable, they're so quick, and I feel like I'm doing a good thing for our country by getting out there and sometimes I call it culling, but hunting them down and reducing the numbers. I really do feel like I'm doing good for Australia.
I was watching your YouTube channel, and for people that haven't seen that, that's the Aussie Huntress. You can jump on and find it. There will be a link in the show notes as well. You've done pretty good for only someone that's just started chasing deer. Now, it's primarily fallow, and you had some pretty good heads there. How did that come about, and what were some of the steps in your journey to be so successful?
Well, it all started back in about, I'll say 2008 or thereabouts. I went out hunting with a mate, and he preferred to go after foxes. And one night we, under the spotlight, we saw a deer, and we looked at each other, and it was actually a big fallow buck, and I was kind of like, just what the? And we looked at each other and went, oh, no, we'll let him be, and that's pretty much how it was. And then I said, well, there's obviously deer in the region, like, how come you buggers have never told me about this? And they said, oh, well, we kind of didn't think you were that interested. And I was like, oh, okay. And then a lot of time passed, and it wasn't until I've actually now bought my own block over in that same region and residing out here full time that I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get into the deer hunting, and, it's good for my overall fitness and the challenge I love. And yeah, therefore I'm out here having a go and learning all about it firsthand. I listen to a lot of other hunters that I, have conversations with, and learning bits and pieces as I go. But at the end of the day, you learn a lot when you're out there in the field yourself. You can take all these things on board, what people tell you and what you read, or look at other YouTube clips and listen to podcasts, etc. It's all helpful, but you get those skills when you're out on the land yourself.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm a big proponent of getting out and doing it. And that's how I learn. I always learn through making mistakes and thinking about it, reflecting, and then improving upon it. And I'm completely with you. You can hear from people and talk about it. And that's why I started the podcast, to be honest, because I've had a couple of little kids and I'm not going to be getting out as much. And I thought this is a really good way to keep talking about it, learning. And plus I love it so much. So that was the reason I did this. And it's still one of those things that when I go out into the bush, I continue to make those mistakes even after talking to people, because it's not scenario specific, if that makes sense. Someone might give me a pointer and then I'll get out there, but it might not play out that exact way. So then you sort of have to reflect on it and go, oh, what do I do now? And that's cool. That's all part of the learning experience. And I wouldn't change a thing, because that's what makes it that challenge. And that's what makes it so exciting to go out and be involved in this.
Yeah, definitely. It's always unpredictable. Sometimes you think you know what's going to happen or what the deer are going to do. And, you know, you might take your next step and you stand on a twig or something, and it makes that noise, and the deer's looked up and gone up, danger, and ping, off they're gone. And you're like, oh my goodness, why didn't I look down for that next step? Or, you know, there's always things that go through your head. So even with some of my clips on YouTube, for example, like it might have taken me 10 goes out there in the field to then be able to get something good to share. And you learn by your mistakes. There's so much to, you know, that you've got to be mindful of when you're out there as to making it work and getting it right, and hopefully landing a good shot, and, you know, also hoping that you see something that's good to take.
Yeah, look, that's one of the things I have no idea how you do film the hunts. And as a new deer hunter, me trying to chase these things, the last thing on my mind is filming it and placing cameras and the like. I'm fully trying to focus on what I'm doing out there. How does that, you know, because you've been chasing them for a few years now. What made you want to film it?
Well, actually, my son suggested to me that this is all going really well, Mum, and you're pretty good at it, and you should start to try and film some of it and get a YouTube account going. And, you know, I'm a bit old school. I'm like, YouTube, like, I'm not sure I've even watched YouTube. And so I was like, okay, I'll check all this out. And so when I first started doing it and set up an account and come up with a name for myself and, you know, move forward with this idea of capturing some footage of the hunts and that. Yeah, so I set it all up, and then I started filming, starting off with the iPhone, and then I advanced to getting myself a camcorder, and therefore I could have 2 lots of footage. I'm trying to film in 4K for better screen, you know, better visual. But it's tricky, that's for sure, because sometimes I think I've pressed play and I haven't, and then the camera might have moved, because if you see something in a hurry, you just, I don't know, I try and do my best, but there's a lot that I've missed capturing, which is really annoying, because there's some good hunts that I've had and adventures out there that only I know about, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's get into a few of those, and I'm keen to hear a couple of stories, because it's leading up to the rut, so I'm always wanting to hear what people have been up to in previous years. Have you got a really good rut story?
Yeah, I actually have one that I can share with you tonight, and it's pretty much back in the rut season last year. It was a Labor Day long weekend, and the adventure started off with my son. We went away for those 3 days because it's a long weekend holiday, of course, and we went to a spot on a property that we had access to, and it was sort of a bit of a rise, like a small hill. And as we approached that, we sort of had a good look around. We did a U-turn, and as we did the U-turn, 2 nice big bucks stood up and stood there staring at us, and we stared back, and we were like, oh my God, like, we can't believe this. And so we pretty much tried to, you know, get the rifles, but by the time we did that they were off. So we missed that moment, and it was on the third day, the last day we were there, and stuff like that I just kind of can't get out of my head. It does a replay over and over. And so what I did was, obviously that weekend finished, I had the opportunity to go back to the same property a week later with it in my mind that fingers crossed that they might be back in their beds again, in the same area, of course. And so I went out nice and early, probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and parked the car a good kilometre away from the area. So I walked at a steady pace up to about 300 metres away from the area where I knew they were bedded up, because we also found where they'd been attacking some of the bushes and the scrub there, and we found a scraping and that. So I had a pretty good idea of the area, and so the last, I'll say 100 metres on approach, I'm down on my hands and knees, literally crawling up. I was like, if you could imagine a lion stalking a zebra kind of thing. And it was amazing because I could hear the odd croak going on, like it was in the full rut. And so exciting, and I spotted a young doe, so I had to really slow things up and be ever so quiet and then wait for it to move on. And then I got to a spot where I knew I'd get a good visual on the bedding area that we'd seen them, and there was nothing there. So I was really like, oh goodness. And then daylight's going, of course, and then I heard this croak quite loud. I knew it was close by, and I was like, oh, please, 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 may someone, come out in to get a visual on you. I could hear, but I couldn't see. So I knew he was, or one of them was around, and then, I just held my position, and then one of them appeared. I'm pretty sure it was one of the two that I'd seen the week before, and waited for him to come out, and I took a shot and put him on the ground. And the funny thing is about this story is that I was that excited. It was like the biggest buck I'd taken so far, and I was that excited. I ran. I didn't even, I got a little bit of footage of him, but I didn't do a selfie like, the rifle and take a couple of selfies. I just literally I had to get back to the car because daylight was going, of course. That's always a dilemma. And so I ran and walked all the way back to get the car, and I was like, crikey, how am I going to get this big boy into the back of my car? And there was just no way that I could do that. So I had some rope there in the back, and I've got these bars on the back of my car that I literally tied him up, and off I went, and I dragged him back. I had about 20 Ks to drive back to where I was camped for the night. And by the time I got him back to camp, I put him, obviously took him off and took some selfies and some photos then. And the next morning I woke up, and normally when you don't gut a deer, they'll blow up, like their belly will blow up. And I was just that excited. I didn't even think to, gut him or do any of that. And so the next morning I woke up and I come back out to have a look at him, and I'm like, why, what's going on here? He hasn't blown up. And it wasn't until I flipped him over that I only had pretty much half of him. Like from towing him back to that spot, I'd lost him. He'd pretty much gutted himself, or in the drag, he had become gutted on the way home. So I was like, oh, wow, okay. And in hindsight, I should have done I forget what they call it, a caping. I should have done a caping, and he had a nice head on him that I could have, possibly got taxidermed. But, when these things happen, there's so much excitement. Sometimes it's a bit emotional. Sometimes I think I'm going to start crying. It's just so amazing that I got such a big boy. But yeah, so that's the story of my last rut season, and this season I'm hoping to get one that I can, kind of calm the farm and think about things once I've dropped one and go about doing a cape and, going for getting off to the taxidermist. And yeah, I'd like to do that at some stage.
So I was watching your YouTube and I saw you were pretty excited because you got a nice red stack. That was your first red, I believe.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Wow. Wasn't that an adventure? Gee whiz. Oh, gosh. I knew that red stag was there. I heard him the night before I took him. Like there's a bit of a water. It's a weird sort of setup. It's like a big swamp out there on a property that I have access to, and so you can hear things moving about. And I did one of those classical things like I have mentioned about your footing. So now if I'm in a spot, I always clear my footing area. But on this occasion, the first night I was out there doing a set out, I did a crunch on a twig or a branch or something underfoot, and I heard him take off, and like he knew I was there. So I was like, oh gosh, what are the chances he might come back the next night? Because quite often they won't. Once they're spooked, that's it for maybe a week, or some people say they can not come back to an area for up to a year, which, I believe that. So I thought I'll try my luck, and again, right on dusk where, you're just about losing visibility, and that deer, you wouldn't believe, he was about, and this is as true as I'm speaking right now, he walked about 4 to 5 meters in front of me, and it was just epic. And I couldn't turn only at that stage I was only filming with my iPhone. I couldn't turn the iPhone on because the light at that particular time of the day would have, given up my location and he would have been gone. But you could tell in his body language he knew something was not quite right, and he walked literally straight past me. And I then had to reposition myself, like pick my rifle up because I was over a log. I had to pick the rifle up ever so slightly and slowly, and just, kind of slowly pivot myself around to the left. And my shot was a freestanding shot, like holding the rifle out, because I had nothing to lean on in that direction. And I hit him right across the top of the shoulder, but it was enough to put him down straight away. And I just I couldn't believe it. Like I nearly overshot him because it was at such close range. So yeah, that was just after about 2 days being out there walking and trudging through those swamps. And again, I've made a YouTube video of that particular hunt. It's a shame I didn't actually get the shooting part of it, in the footage. But again, them's the breaks that you can't always capture that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. It would be great if everyone had like a film, like a videographer following them around to film hunts, because I think there's some pretty cool stories out there of people getting different things and being able to see that. But I guess that's why hunting shows is probably so popular.
Yeah, well, I still like even talking about it now. It almost makes me get goosebumps how close that deer, like he nearly walked straight into me. It's quite profound. And to be able to get him and, I've got his head outside and just to sometimes I look and think back like, oh my God, like that was just so exciting. Like my heart nearly jumped out of my chest when I could hear him splish, splish, every footstep coming directly at me. I was like, oh my God, like what's happening here right now? Wow.
It is cool. I've had 2 encounters where they've both been within 10 meters of myself, and I haven't been able to get a shot on either, but it's been very, very cool and exciting, and it does just get the blood pumping because they're such amazing creatures, and being up that sort of close and personal to them is really, really exciting. What other species have you harvested?
I've only got one of the Chiddle around March last year as well, a little spiker boy. So that's pretty much it. I haven't ever seen a Samba in the wild or had a crack at Samba, but I kind of haven't really had an interest in the Samba because I try to take what I kill for like meat purposes. That doesn't always happen, of course, because sometimes you just can't get access to where you've shot something. But for me to manage a Samba carcass on my own, like that's just impossible. Even a good size red hind is hard for me to manage. But I've recently put a winch I've set it up in the rear of my car so that I can winch a carcass. If I can't lift it in the back, I can winch it up and in and get the carcass home. And because I've got a chiller, so I can manage the meat there. But like I say, that's not always possible.
Yeah, look, that's one of the tricky ones. I'm envious of you having a chiller because it's always in my mind. I'm more a meat hunter than a trophy hunter. I have no problems taking, I'd like if the meat come with a good set of antlers, and I'm definitely chasing bucks in the rut, but I do really want to make sure that everything I shoot, I try and get as much meat off as possible to feed the family. So I am very envious you've got a chiller because it's one of the things I've sort of struggled with is that when I am successful and when I am harvesting animals, what am I going to do with them at home? And I think it's so much better to be able to hang a carcass whole and then being able to have to break it down into cryovac and wet age it like I currently do. So that's something I'm very envious of you. Do you think that helps out?
I think, in my short time of doing deer hunting, that the one thing I have learnt, Matt, is that there's good meat and then there's not so good meat. I think that the big old bucks aren't worth touching. Maybe take the back straps. Even then, that's kind of debatable. Like they're an old male beast that just isn't, to me, just isn't as tasty as, for example, if I shoot a young doe. Like there's no comparison. So for me, if I'm looking for meat, and I'll go out hunting and I won't shoot anything unless it's for that purpose. I kind of do, in a way, all three styles of hunting. I kind of do a bit of trophy hunting, I do the meat hunting, and then I also do a bit of culling for different property owners. And sometimes when you're just out there culling, it's for that purpose alone. And if the property owner doesn't want the meat and I've got full freezers, then it's unfortunate that meat has to just kind of be left there. And I don't really like doing that, but sometimes if I'm invited to a property to do a job, then that's what I've got to be mindful of doing. I always offer to give meat away anywhere and wherever I can. And if you ask anyone that knows me, like I must have asked them a dozen times, do you eat venison? Do you want some meat? I'm always trying to share it and get people introduced to it. And, sometimes I turn people around and they enjoy it and they like the way I've processed it, which is very different from when, say, someone's shot a deer. And let's just say it's an 8 or a 9-year-old buck, and they've, done a cut. They've taken off it. It hasn't been hung, and they hand it over to someone. And here, try a bit of venison. Now, I could pretty much say that bit of meat would just not be that enjoyable, if any enjoyment at all. So, hence people have this thing that don't like it, not going there kind of thing. And I'll say to some people, look, how about you let me, especially if it's a property owner, how about if you let me bring you a piece of meat that, you can open your mind and try it. the way I suggest, and I can pretty much guarantee that you will actually enjoy it. And they're like, oh, all right then, if you're that persistent, And quite often they'll say, that was bloody delicious, Chrissy. Thank you so much. Like, we really appreciate that. And hey, next time we want some more. And, one property owner that I've turned around, the last time I was over on their property, they had got their chiller up and running, and I put 2 nice young spiker carcasses in their chiller, and I actually butchered them up for them, and they were just so happy and appreciative that I'd done that. But I know I'll be able to get back on that property, and if I want to take someone there with me, or I want to go looking for a trophy buck, the door will be open probably, I could guarantee it'll open for me pretty much in a heartbeat.
All right, so how did you learn how to butcher? Because that is one of the trickier things once you do harvest an animal. I guess, how did you learn that skill?
Well, a deer carcass, if we're talking about fallow, which is something I can manage, it's not that much different to a sheep carcass. In fact, I just butcher the fallow carcass up identical to the way I would do a sheep. And so I learned how to do a sheep, over time, spending time on friends' farms that they, do their own meat, and, you watch and you learn and you have a go. And, I was able to do a sheep carcass. So, of course, I, then said to myself, well, I can do a deer carcass. And the property that I now reside at happens to have a chiller, which is a big bonus. And, I have some of the local farmers around me, bring their sheep to hang in my chiller and so on. And so it's sort of kind of what goes around comes around, yeah.
So what are the plans? You talked about, chasing trophy bucks. What are the plans for this upcoming rut for yourself?
Oh, well, I guess I'm excited, and I don't like wishing time away normally, but yeah, bring it on. I'm out doing a bit of groundwork. I've got a few cameras set up here and there just to see what movement there is about. There's a few properties that I know are saved for me. I've kind of proven myself over time with the meat, as well as, sometimes I'll go to a property and only have one shot and take one deer, and that's it. So it's kind of pretty cool that I've earned that respect, that they know I'm not going to go out there shooting at anything willy-nilly and letting, the rifle off like firecrackers going off kind of thing. I'm excited by different, activity like hoof prints and different, tracks and things that I currently am out there doing or not researching, but reconnaissance work, you might call it. And that's key to knowing the whereabouts and looking for the fresh stuff. Like, there's a ton of stuff out there that, might be from last year or the year before or years ago. But looking for the fresh signs are key to then possibly, if all goes well, you'll be able to get a big boy. So, if other people are hoping to track something down this rut, my best advice is to put in the groundwork now, January, February, March, because come March and April, it's going to be on. And if you haven't done your homework kind of thing, you can't just expect to jump in your car and drive to a spot and hope to land something. I mean, look, people do, and you might get lucky, but when I have people come over that ask me, can you take me out and see if we can get something, it might sound like I'm big noting myself, but more often than not, we do get something that's worthwhile, yeah.
Now, I saw that on some of your YouTube that you do tend to take people out a little bit. Where's that come from? Because, you are quite new into hunting, so it's like myself, and I've always sort of been a bit apprehensive of taking people out with me because and showing them around if they're less knowledgeable than me, because I don't think that I'm a very good hunter, I'll be honest. So where did that sort of come about from?
I think it's mainly come from the knowledge that I've gained within the area that I live in and like within my region, etc. But I kind of have this, you might call it an inner confidence based on the amount of sightings that I have and that I've seen. Like I spend a lot of my spare time out bushwalking, out driving to areas where I may have seen something. So then I'll go back there and then I'll do a lot of walking in the area, looking for signs, kind of keeping my finger on the pulse of where I think the deer are. But at the end of the day, I kind of find that they're just everywhere. Like they really are. And if you see does, it's kind of a no-brainer for me that where there's does, there's going to be a buck somewhere in the zone. And it's a matter of trying to work out where the food source is. Okay, so if there's, say, a farmer has, for example, got an oats crop or a canola or any type of crop that's bordering a forest area or bushlands, etc., then the deer are going to come out to graze. So you can do like what I call a sit-out hunt and get yourself out, providing you've got approval to be on the farmer's land, and find a spot out there where you can be overlooking some fresh tracks and sit and wait and hope that something comes out, at dusk. And that's pretty much what I do a lot of the time is look for those locations, look for a spot where I can sit, and sometimes you might sit out there for 3 or 4 hours or longer and see nothing but kangaroos and maybe an odd fox or something, and then you've got to try and walk and navigate your way back to the car in the dark and fall over things, and it's a bit hectic, but every now and again you'll get the prize.
Yeah, that's I think a lot of people, and this comes back to anti-hunters and animal activists, I think they really think it's really easy for shooters because, I always hear people say, oh, it's unfair. You've got a rifle, a high-powered rifle, and the animal is defenseless. And there's just so much more to it. And it just shows that sort of limited understanding of what hunting is actually like. Do you mainly hunt private property or do you do a bit of public land hunting as well?
Yeah, a bit of both, Matt. It's depending on time, availability I've got as to where I can go and what I can do. Some farms are, they're massive land holdings, and, you can spend 3 or 4 days on a private property, and if they want you there to do some culling, you might end up shooting, 20 to 30 deer. You might only be able to take 1 or 2. And see, the other catch as well that I find, I'll say frustrating, is that you're not allowed to share the meat. Like there's new laws now in place around meat distribution. I'm not sure if you're aware of that or...
Yeah, I've heard of that down in Victoria, and I've read the documents from the parliamentary discussions about it where a lot of people are misinformed after reading the discussion from Parliament, as far as I'm concerned, and it was questioned down there in Victoria about, is it illegal to share game meat? And the easiest answer is yes, but they're not going to police it. That was pretty much exactly what the politician who was talking about this was said in the transcript. And I had a solicitor talk to me about that and explain that, hey, yes, game meat is actually illegal, because I had a previous podcast and we raised it. And then we got all these emails saying, nope, the SSAA have said that game meat can be shared in Victoria. And so we just went, oh, okay, well, we must have got it wrong. And we said that on air. And then we had a solicitor contact us and say, no, they've actually wrong. Here it is. And he gave us the transcript from the parliamentary discussions where it's clearly there saying that it's illegal to share game meat. However, they're not going to police it. Now, my concern with that is that they're not policing it at the moment, but they could at any time. And the legislation is actually there that it is illegal. So I am aware of that, Chrissy. Thanks for that.
Yeah, it's totally contradictory of itself then. And what they say in Parliament, can be written off as, I guess, nothing. And if it's written in law, then that's kind of what really stands. And I don't know, look, at the end of the day, I have quite a lot of small goods made out of the meat that I get, and I have help in, having that made. It's delicious. It'd be great to see. Look, I wish I could harvest every deer that I have taken. I really do. And sometimes when you're out on these properties and some of the deer, the damage that they're doing, something has to be done about it from a farmer's perspective. And for me, just to take them out and not use the meat, it's just not right. It pains me to have to leave good meat there on the ground at times. It's wrong, and I wish there was something that could be done better, because, again, if we're going to look at overall controlling and managing the deer populations better, then we also have to make it a little easier, or have some things in place for people to be able to deal with the meat. And I know we have to abide by, regulations for food handling and stuff like that. But I just think sometimes the regulations are a bit over the top as to, the difficulties and the hurdles people have to jump over to, use the meat. Yeah.
It does seem such a shame and such a backwards way of thinking. I've said it previously on the podcast. I'd love to see where you could take a deer to a butcher and pay them money to break down the carcass. And that would provide, again, more money back into the economy. That would, potentially look at jobs. There's so many elements behind hunting from a vast array of perspectives. And there's just so much benefit that I feel in Australia we're not capitalising on from an economic point of view specifically, because, I look at America and I just think about the tag system and how much money they make there, and the more access that they have, and then the taxes from gun sales and ammunition that, again, goes back into conservation. These are all really, really positive things, and that comes on the back of access. And it's one of the things I've spoken about on the podcast. I've really struggled for private access, and that's cool. That's just part of the journey, and it probably is because I live up in Sydney and I don't have the connections with farmers and things like that. So it's been a real interesting journey for me, because I've pretty much always been chasing deer on public land, and that has been a very difficult sort of challenge for me. And I'm pretty excited over the next few sort of episodes. Hopefully I have people on it that are a lot better than I am, and they're just going to be talking about how they approach it. So I might be able to pick up some tips and tricks from them for that. But it's one of those things that I just feel there's so much opportunity and it's not being capitalized on enough. And I don't know where our larger bodies are, that I feel they could do a lot more to promote hunting, grow the numbers of hunting, but then, as you said, really help out farmers, because some of the things I've seen is that, and I get it from a farmer's perspective, why would they let me onto their property? They don't know me from a bar of soap. I'm not a local. I'm not someone that's around the corner. Now, I'm a good person, I think. I do everything by the book. I, have had chances to shoot deer in public land, but over the wrong side of the road or not with a safe backdrop, and I haven't taken it. And that was before I got my first deer. So, well, in my opinion, that shows sort of my ethics. I don't tolerate poaching. If anyone's a poacher or shoots something over the wrong side of the fence, I cut them for my life. That's what I do. Now, why would a farmer put me onto their property? Because they don't know that. They don't know me as a person, and it's a big risk. And I understand why they wouldn't as well.
Well, it's tricky business, Matt. Even when you do know the farmer and you may have known them for, I'll say, many years, and they say, yes, you have access, and they even give you some keys for padlocks, etc. And I'm talking about from a personal experience in this instance, and the property holding, I'll say, is probably around 10,000 acres, and I had permission to hunt on there and for like vermin reduction and to reduce damage to the crops from the deer. And at one stage, the owner contacted me and asked for the key back. And I said, oh, is everything all right? And he was like, well, actually, no, it's not. Everything isn't all right. I've found a couple of calves shot dead. And as you can imagine, I was like, horrified to hear that, and even more horrified to think that he could have been thinking that it might have been me that had done that. And so the problem there is that I wasn't the only one who had access to the property to do hunting on. And, it's one of those things where I know how I hunt, and I quite often won't take a shot if I'm not 100% sure. There are people out there that will just say, if they're spotlighting, they'll just see eyes and pull the trigger and then have a look at what they've really just killed. And, it actually saddens me because that trust has just kind of gone in a heartbeat. And now when I talk to different farmers about access, I actually ask them, and I hope it doesn't come across as being selfish, but it's kind of for my own self-protection, is I say, can I ask, are there other people that you have on your property hunting? And they might say yes or no. And I say, well, if it's just me, then I would like to know that, please, like up front. And if there's other people, for me moving forward, if there's other people that have access to hunting on the property as well, I'm kind of like, maybe I just stick to the properties where I know that I'm kind of like have that sole access to myself. And I know that might come across as being a bit selfish, but I certainly know how other people go about hunting, and I know how, like, what my standards are on that. And, they can be quite different, let me tell you. And even where I reside now with the coming rut season, I'm kind of like, I'm so excited about it, but I'm also mindful of, what's going to happen out in the state forests and, the public lands that people have access to, because I hear it. I can hear it from my house. I've had my house, like, people out spotlighting, and, next minute I've got a spotlight coming in through my bedroom window or something, and I'm like, what's going on, guys? Like, have some respect. And this is what kind of can ruin it for the people that are trying so hard to do the right thing, trying to get access to private properties. And there's only, it's that same old thing. It's a minority group that can ruin it for the larger people doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's such a shame. On a previous podcast, I had a bloke called Andrew who's down there in Vic, and I don't know if you heard the story, but he got shot in his swag. He was on public land at a public campsite before he was going out hunting, and a bloke was illegally spotlighting. He not allowed to be there, obviously, not allowed to spotlight. Saw the ring, the eyelet of the swag, and considered that to be an eye, and shot at it and ended up shooting him through the leg and caused a lot of heartache and damage. And, Andrew's doing really well now, which is great to hear. But man, like, I just sit there and go, unfortunately, that's the problem, is that there's a lot of people out there that do the right thing, and that small minority that do the wrong thing really make the good people pay. Because I can understand if you've gone through that, and as you just said, that happened on a property that you had access to, and then you lost access and it wasn't you, well, there's a problem because you're getting punished for something you didn't do. And your name is almost tarnished as well because, if property owners talk, there's a potential for that. There's so many elements to it that I just feel, for me, one of the biggest problems we've got to face is people doing the wrong thing within our community. And it's something that we all shouldn't stand for.
Yeah, well, I could tell, the farmer, he was like, Chrissy, we're pretty sure it wasn't you, love. However, we just don't know who it was. No one's owned up for anything. And so we've just had to draw a line in the sand, and that's that. We can't afford to have stock losses like this. And yeah, they were apologetic about it. And I actually was a bit angry about it for a while because I was like, bloody hell, like if you've done the wrong thing, put your hand up for it. It's like when, the hunters and that come out into the parks and forests, and like the mess and the rubbish that some of them can leave behind. It's just like, it's uncalled for, and they need just to show a little bit more respect and take what they bring in, take it out, and, leave it how it was. Again, they're just making it look bad for the overall hunting community, and it's wrong.
You just took me straight back to a previous paid property I went to, and beautiful spot, unbelievable views, and it was littered with rubbish and crap that hunters had left behind. And I can say hunters had left it behind because the only people that were camping and had access to this property was hunters, because it was a paid hunting block. And the shotgun shells and cases, they would have been there in their hundreds, if not well over 1,000. And it was such a shame because I know hunters sometimes get their back up and go, oh, how do you know it was hunters that left that mess? Well, in this case, I definitely know it was hunters because no one else was there. And I don't think too many campers are just running around with shotgun shells, just throwing them on the ground. It is such a shame because, as I said, there's a lot of people that do the right thing, and there are some bad eggs in every group, not just hunting. It's in every group, but that really does shine a spotlight. But I think it's worse for us because we're already up against it as hunters, because we're using firearms, we're harvesting animals, which some people don't like as well. So it's almost amplified that we're these bad people because of the actions of that small minority. So that does suck. I'm with you there.
Yeah. It's, look, most of us are pretty mindful and respectful while we're out there. And, if you're doing the right thing, over time, doors will open for you. Like, it's taken me a while, especially being a woman in the field. I know that when I've spoke about hunting and stuff, I you can tell people kind of do a bit of a weird look, or, look at you like, really? And it's only then someone else gives them a poke in the ribs and goes, hey, mate, she's all right. She's not a bad shot. And, kind of give her a go. And, and then if I make the effort to take meat out afterwards, if I've been lucky to get something, and yeah, it's kind of like I feel pretty good about the respect that I've earned and the relationships that I now have with those property owners. Instead of going out and sleeping in the car or in a swag on the ground, it's like, hey, we've made the spare bedroom up for you, and blah, 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 and hey, come and sleep in the caravan, or, whatever. And you kind of go, yeah, there it is. I'm doing something right.
Yeah, look, it's one of those challenges, and it's all part of it, unfortunately, and you got to take the good with the bad in everything you do. So it is one of those things. All right, Chrissy, I've had an absolute pleasure talking to you tonight. I'm glad we've got the chance to have a chat, and I wish you all the best on the upcoming rut and hope it is a successful one for you. All right, guys, so what I'll do is I'll have in the show notes, I'll have all the links to Chrissy's YouTube and her Facebook and Instagram and things like that, so you can jump on and check it out. Chrissy, once again, thank you very much for joining us. Best of luck with the upcoming rut.
Thanks, Matt, and best of luck to you and the listeners for the upcoming rut season. Cheers.
And listeners, bye for now. If you have a topic, guest, question, or any gear that you want to hear about on the podcast, shoot us an email, australianhuntingandbeyond@gmail.com. Alternatively, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links are in the show notes. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a review and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.